Welcome to Defen episode number 30 something. 31?
31,
probably?
yeah.
Yes, 31. Yeah. So, this is our second episode in which we're trying to live stream this stuff. Just a quick hi to all the people who have joined in. And we have, I think, around 14 people. So please post your questions or anything during the show, and we'll happily try to read them out loud, and then so Bruce can answer them. Or if you have any questions for us, we'd love to answer them as well in whatever the way we can. So let's get started. So, Bruce, please introduce yourself.
Because it's my job. I will do the introductions here.
Oh man.
My name's Bruce Hauman. And this is a Clojure podcast. So
Hey Bruce,
yeah?
Bruce, how do you pronounce your last name? Hauman. I say Hauman.
That is correct. Hauman is the correct pronunciation. And it's not a common name.
Seems like a German name, is that right? Or a European name?
It is a German name. So I have a German and Norwegian ancestry. So
right, okay. Yeah. Perfect American.
Oh God. God.
Sorry, we'll stop now. Stop at that. Stop talking about that.
Yeah.
Back to Clojure. Yes. Safe space.
Oof, my goodness. Back to Clojure. I think people know me for Figgy mostly, and dev cards, and a couple talks I gave on Clojure script. And that's in this context, I think that's probably the best way to.
But how did you get to Figwheel? I mean, of course, we can talk about Figwheel. Obviously, that is one of the, I think, like a kind of a game-changing stuff for Clojure script stuff. I mean, every time I want to show something to any non-Clojure script people, I just show this and look, now, this is the tooling that you need for building anything that is, remotely awesome or remotely, useful compared to the other languages. But how did you get into Clojure?
Oh, how I got into Clojure. Well, I'm a Lisper schemer from, early on in my career, and not professionally, but just in school. I was a languages guy. I liked parsers. I liked languages. So Scheme and the Scheme community, especially Dr. Scheme and the PLT community, I was part of that. I worked on the pattern matching library for Dr. Scheme, which is now Racket, and when I was in college. And I don't know. So I've always had a penchant for Lisp in general. But you go into the real world and you work in Ruby or PHP or Java, whatever. And I did that for quite a while, and ended up, getting really sick of it. There is a point where you're done. And my good friend Toby Crawley was using Clojure. He's building a mutant, and he was telling me about it.
Yes.
And it was a Lisp, so it wasn't a hard sell. It wasn't really a hard sell at all, and so. I kind of burnt out, where I worked on a startup, and I was like, okay. I burnt out on this large monolithic Ruby code base, and I was done. How many more features can we pack on this application? And, there's a point where, your brain just says, why am I doing this? And why am I doing it in one thread? I happily took a pretty long hiatus and started playing with Clojure script initially, because I've always been a front end guy. I've always been a UI guy, and I feel really comfortable in that domain. So, and Clojure script was rougher back then when I started, but it was a bit rougher. But I really liked it. I really liked the language, and so I was on a hiatus I was introduced to ClojureScript. Working with ClojureScript was problematic, and that led to Figwheel.
No, I was just saying this is like one of those Hollywood movies where, you got sick of all this shitty languages and you are somewhere living like a hermit, and there is this, CIA people coming in and then saying, okay, you need to build something for us. And okay, I'm going to come back and build Figwheel for you.
Yeah, well, I like that. I like that that dramatization of it. I am the hero in this scenario, so this is fine with me. That's terrific. I'm not the guy.
You are indeed a hero.
my God.
I mean, you have no idea how Figwheel changed my life. But there is a
my
question from one of our audience now. So, do you still live in your dome, or is this a permanent house?
Yeah. There are walls around me as we speak. There are. Yes, I am in an apartment in Montreal. It is snowing outside. Yeah. It's good to be. It's good to have solid walls. I'm telling you. Yeah. I am. I did live in that dome for quite a while. Right now, I'm not. I'm going to be in Montreal for a year at least. So.
That was a bit of a non sequitur, I'm afraid.
Yeah.
But
no, it's fine. Let's get off the dome and onto something else. Yeah.
So I was going to say to you, Bruce, I mean, you kind of like went from like ClojureScript was a bit rough, so let's do Figwheel. I mean, but Figwheel was quite a big jump, wasn't it? I mean, it was like real kind of, Brett Victor was doing this stuff bullshit wise, a few years ago, but this made it real,
Yeah. The thing, I just happened to be like the right person in the right place at the right time, right? Because you think about it was just a confluence of ideas. One, so ClojureScript, you could load files, right? I mean, ClojureScript, if you got the browser REPL up and running, and for somehow connected it to your editor, and then, if you got this working somehow, you could theoretically load files in real time. Now, none of this was working very well or at all, right? But you could load files into a process. Like the tools and the possibility for loading files was there. And the Clojure compiler doesn't do strange, encapsulation of their modules. They're just JavaScript objects, right? So they're object literals in JavaScript. So boom, you can overwrite all the function definitions just by loading a file. And then most of the definitions are functions, right? You're not clobbering state when you reload. And so Clojure had all this there already, right? And then React came along and it was kind of like, this is a done deal. There's no reason why this shouldn't happen. And as far as the auto load is concerned, that happened because the REPL didn't work, right? The REPL did not really work that well. And so I needed another way to get feedback. And so just having it load when you save a file, was kind of like the next thing. So, and I tried it, I tried it and I thought I was crazy for trying it. I tried it, it worked. I was shocked that it worked. I was shocked that it worked so well. And so then I've told this story in my talk, but it's how it actually happened.
So go and watch
right?
his talk. That's the.
What was that again?
No, so go and watch his talk. So that's the cue here.
But it was just all the right things came in all the right pieces were there, and I was like, it doesn't sound like a good idea to reload into a running environment as you save a file. And so I was like, it doesn't sound like a good idea, but I'm going to try it anyway, and it worked out.
So the question that comes from Nat, and you do answer this a little bit in the in the blog as well, is this file, the reloading bit, and you have this problem, if you like, with the way that you write code, because you have to start doing this thinking about state. So what I mean, how have your kind of thoughts evolved on that one, Bruce? Or is that like this writing reloadable code you have here?
Yeah. So how I've evolved, so I think Figwheel had like a big impact on in terms, had way more, it had a big impact in terms of adoption of ClojureScript, I think. And
yeah, sure, definitely.
And it kind of, but like at this cost, but unfortunately, it made it easier for people to start using ClojureScript. The downside was this auto loading part, right? Like, because if people have not thought about the load time side effects of their code, which probably very few people, have to this extent, it can be hell, right? If you're like, I want to just bang on stateful objects all day long, like 3JS stuff, and like if you want to do stuff that's super stateful, and it can become quite difficult. It can be a very, very difficult experience. You can turn that off, but who's going to? Like that you have to learn about all the configuration. And so, as a first-time experience, I do worry about the auto-loading part of Figwheel, and it'd be interesting if there were like a tool that let you turn it on and off in the Figwheel, like a tool like in your browser that you could just click on, click off the auto loading, boom, just like that. You can do it from the Figwheel REPL. You can turn it on and off, but again, I don't think a lot of people use those tools. But if people could just turn it on and turn it off, then that would get it out of people's way. So is that answer your question, or are you thinking of something else when you asked that?
I was just wondering, like, when you're talking about as a beginner experience. I mean, I use it every day. Thank you very much.
Okay.
And I use it with reframe applications, and I'm just pressing save, and it's coming up, and it's a heads up display, and everyone's rocking. We're all happy. So actually, my real question is whether you think it's really an issue anymore in the ClojureScript world. Because you kind of had to think about it. In the early days, because there wasn't much support for this kind of thing and no one really had thought around it. It was a new thing.
Yeah.
But now that it's like a bigger community, we've got more frameworks. How are you seeing the feedback on that,
Oh.
in real world usage,
Oh gosh, maybe I didn't wake up early enough this morning. I'm having a little bit of a problem grokking the question. Are you basically saying, do people even have to worry about thinking about the load time side effects of their code, or is it now it just becomes second nature to them, and all the frameworks support it now?
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I mean by evolution.
Yeah.
Like when you first started, you had to worry about this because yes, it was an issue, and JavaScript people coming to it from the beginning. You're thinking about them, but in the ClojureScript community, it seems like it doesn't seem like it's a big issue anymore.
No, I would say I would agree with that, and I think again there are certain applications that like when you use Figwheel on Node, it's a different experience. You don't have a heads-up display. You don't. It's a different, and it's the running model inside of Node is different, and so it gives you. I mean, you're loading your code in real time, but the trade-off is a little narrower there. It would be nice if you did have like maybe a browser window giving you feedback from the Node process or da-da-da-da-da. But
maybe this is a new thing though, because I've never used it with Node. So I didn't even know that was possible. I didn't even know that was possible.
Basically,
what the hell are you doing with that?
So, but yeah, Figma works in Node. It works in React Native. All right, it works.
Right.
All right, so it gets around. You can it gets around in the nicest sense possible.
Yeah.
And you can use it. You can develop Chrome plugins. You can do all these things with Figwheel. Some of them, the setup is much harder than others, obviously. But yeah. So there are different trade-offs in these different environments. The browsers, if you're developing for the browser, I think your argument is correct. If you're developing for the browser, it seems like in the greater ClojureScript community, like this is a solved problem. We like to isolate our state into to one place. And even better than it being a solved problem, right? Like Figwheel, by being the go-to tool, forces people who are not used to doing that to do that and get on board pretty quickly, because your return on investment for figuring out is pretty high. Like you're now developing in real time and getting this great feedback and everything. So yeah.
So Bruce,
Yeah.
I see that most of your, at least so far, we're only talking about Clojure script. So what is your take on Clojure side of the world? Because you said, okay, single threading and then all that stuff and Clojure script. And now how much Clojure code do you write?
Well, Figwheel is right.
Yeah.
Figwheel is written in Clojure, right?
Yeah.
So
no, but I mean using Clojure to build other applications rather than tooling.
Yeah. So so you're saying how much real world experience do I have with Clojure itself? Like I've never
I wouldn't
developed...
put it that way, but
yes. I mean,
are you a real programmer, Bruce?
Yeah.
Exactly. That is the bigger question.
No, the answer to that is always no, right? I am not a real programmer. Like, who does this stuff, really? I just do cool demos that make people think I can program.
You're a success at that, for sure.
Make them think that they can too. So, gosh.
Forget that question,
Yeah,
okay?
Yeah. It was my question to myself, so I can still blame you guys for it. So no, I would say I do not have that much professional experience with Clojure, but I've used Clojure quite a bit. And again, like I've spent a lot of time working on Figwheel, and it is a crazy program in a lot of ways. And I've spent my most recent gig, I did a lot of Clojure, and it was Clojure in the combined with Ethereum, right? So it was like super cool, extra cool. Clojure, Ethereum, come on. So yeah, so that was my latest
was
thing.
it a gas? Yeah.
Yeah, it was a gas. I mean, it was ow. It hurt in a way that, very few things, like, the end of the day, those programming days where at the end you're like, I don't know what day it is, and don't ask me to do any date arithmetic, or don't ask me to like put two numbers together. It was difficult at times, especially when you're dealing with a platform that has very little tooling or feedback. It can be very difficult. So yeah.
So were you using a Clojure script or a Clojure interface for the contracts?
Yeah. We're using a Clojure interface to the Ethereum virtual machine, and yeah. So it was cool. It was cool. It was a cool job. But in terms of the larger question, what do I think of Clojure? I mean, I love it. I mean, in terms of programming experience, I find it much better than Clojure script. I think it is it's got a lot of advantages. You're talking to one process, and Clojure proper, I love it. Clojure script as well, though. I do not see myself using other languages ever. I really don't. I mean, it's depending on the problem, obviously, I don't see myself gravitating towards other. I consider Clojure a kind of strange maximum, right? It's like, this may be it for a while, guys. Like, I know we have new programming languages coming out, but and new ideas. But the trade-offs, for getting things done in the real world, I hate to say that. It's so pretentious. If you actually want to do work, what are you doing with those other languages? Clojure's the one. I mean, but that's the way
in your pretend world.
Yeah. But it's the way, that is the way I feel. I hate saying it out loud, but I mean, it is the way I feel. I like Clojure a lot, and if I need to do something, I'm going to reach for Clojure and/or ClojureScript.
So I guess the obvious question is like, what about these situations? I mean, this is a trope, but what the hell?
Yeah.
It's nice to hear your attitude about these things. What about these people who say, yeah, but you need those types because then you're guaranteed certain, your certain bugs are gone, and once you put it in these types, you've got solid guarantees. You're not going to lose sleep at night. What's your answer to the people? Because obviously that's, forget spec for the moment because that's still a bit weaker than real types. But what's your answer to those people who come at you and say, Bruce, you've really got to work with Scala today or ML or Haskell or whatever?
Yeah. Well,
Screw you.
No, it's just funny. First of all, it is a trope. So we are putting words in other people's mouths, right? We are putting words in other people's mouths. It does, but this general idea, right, exists. And I think, like I'm trying to be, not just write this off, but but let's just do it and move on. No, I would say, I think they're overblowing the guarantees that they have. Like they're blowing the guarantees they have up and out of proportion to, again, the real world. Like if you're deploying, 17 microservices, you have, a system of state that is so complex, and you're not going to get any sleep at night. So in your types, they're going to give you very, not a lot of guarantees in that world. If you have a monolithic system that takes in, data and spits it out, you can sleep very, very well, right? Like, I take in data and I spit it out and I wrote Haskell. Yeah, that's, I can definitely, I can roll with that. I think that is a solid argument. But we know in these real systems that, like guaranteeing that there's this process, like and you do, and like we can't say that types aren't helpful while you're programming. You can't. It's like that would be like saying spec isn't helpful while you're programming. You can't say, they are helpful, and it would be great to have the best of all worlds. It would be great to somehow have a trade-off where we have, progressive typing, and we get these static guarantee. It would, typed Clojure is a great idea. If it came in a form that we enjoyed and liked working with. No, again, like I hope that's.
Oh, sorry, I didn't mean.
Yeah. I'm not laughing at type.
He did his best. I mean, I think it's just extra work for. Until you get to spec, I think it felt like an extra burden for library writers that maybe wasn't getting the payback that that it was worth the effort putting into. But there's nothing wrong with his effort, of course.
No, and there's just sheer habit, right? Like there's a reason we like writing dynamic code. I mean, like we get things done quickly, and we pay the price at times for that. Like we're like, oh God, damn, that would have been solved by having types. I wouldn't have had to spend 3 hours on that. If whatever. But I would say we are extremely productive. We get a lot. Clojure programmers, you get a lot of bang out of 10 lines of code.
Definitely.
You get a lot. And if you ever do advent of code or something like that, and you look at, you do a comparison of the solutions, Clojure ends up looking pretty nice,
Yeah. It feels to me like there's a sort of like strata, like at certain types of functions or definitions. It would be quite nice if we had types around them. But then when we want to consume data from external sources or explore APIs, we want to be able to do that interactively, which it's almost impossible to do that when you have to do all the type ceremony up front.
Yeah.
So it feels like, on the one hand, it would be nice to have a bit more typing and specking on the bedrock.
Exactly.
But on the other hand, when you're using the tools to explore stuff, it feels much more productive.
That is a much better answer. Can we let's go with that one.
Oh, I've been talking too much about this shit, right? Okay.
That was I agree with you completely, on that.
Right, VJ, what's the next question? Hey, by the way, just while VJ is thinking about this, I give you a bit of props, by the way, because I had a little issue with Figwheel where I needed to connect up to a local server to do some API stuff, and I ended up being able to drop in a little proxy because you designed it in such a nice way. I could drop a little proxy in to connect back the Figwheel client into my API, so I was really happy about that. Super nice.
Oh well, great. I'm glad. I hope that I'm really glad to hear that. I think most of that is the cores, right? Like it's a side channel, and so it lets you, you're not having to combine it with your server per se. So
yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So I think there are two questions. One is Emacs or some other random shit.
I think I know the answer.
Was that really a question, Emacs? Or
Exactly. Okay, moving on.
No, Emacs. I mean, but I think that's well known. I use Emacs. My
Okay.
God.
Obviously, that's not a real question. We all know.
So unfair.
But
so unfair.
Exactly.
But
so the other question is, I mean, we're talking about typing, and you said you came from Scheme and PLT Racket, and you know that those guys are working for gradual typing and things like that. So how do you contrast them? Because one of the ideas that I heard that I kind of convinced myself that when you're building a program, if you're spending in total, let's say, X amount of time, if you're using dynamic languages, then you spend more time later, or if you're using static typing, you spend more time upfront. But in total, the time is the same. What do you think about that idea?
I mean, that jives with my experience, so that makes sense to me. And the reason I think that I balk right against spending that time up front, and I think all of us do, right? And so it's like it was a leading question, which I appreciate because then I don't have to think of everything. It's when you're, especially because so much of programming is exploration. You're exploring, like, will these pieces even fit together? Like, I have this library, I have this API, I have this thing. I've got to connect them. Are they going to connect? Well, do you want to just see if they connect first? Or do you want to think, do you want to plan it all out and like have the answer, like right off the bat, because now you have to start characterizing these things. Like, this is now a this and a this, and it has a this and a this in it. And don't forget, forgot about that, and that's the forgot about that makes the whole problem really painful, right? Like, when forgot about that and you just have to add a key to a map, it's not really a big deal. But, right? Like, my type has 5 fields in it, and I've been destructuring it, in 100 places, and darn, this is unfortunate. But again, so I prefer to have the flexibility to explore, and I think a lot of what programmers do is exploratory for a pretty long period of time, and then you resolve it. You explore, and resolve it down into, 100 lines of code. Blah, blah, blah. Explore, and then resolve. And that's my process. Bang on things until they work. And then make it look good and pretend it looked good from the beginning.
You like the Git squash, yeah.
But did you play with gradual typing for PLT or Racket or things like that?
Nope, I did not. Never did.
Okay.
It was a long time
So
ago
that
when I did that, so I've never done it.
okay. So if you're building your own full stack application, so what are your choice components these days? I mean, which libraries would you pick for a full stack Clojure or ClojureScript application? Because there are so many libraries available, so many ways to do things in Clojure.
Oh my gosh, as few as possible. So I think is
Okay.
no, really, like as few as possible. Again, like ClojureScript world is still young. The maturity of the libraries is still young, and like and the chance of it going out of fashion is high. And
Maybe let's put it a different way,
Okay.
Bruce. Rather than actually naming libraries and saying like which you prefer, because I think that's a bit unfair. What kind of what kind of leverage do you want to get out of libraries? Do you want to get leverage in terms of interacting with JavaScript, or do you want to get leverage in terms of interacting with Node, or with with a browser, or with a DOM, or what kind of things are you looking to get leverage from?
Okay, I would definitely use React, and I would use Sublano. All right, so I always use React and Sublano in terms of a front-end application. And then I gradually, I build from Sublano and an Atom for as long as I can, right? And so I do it as long as I can, just use React, blah, 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 to see if I can do that. And then if I need some performance, I'll make a pure component or whatever, the pattern where it will only render if state is changed, period. And then I use that until that doesn't work anymore. And then I start considering other frameworks, and I have a preference for an OM style where you pass the state. I have a preference for passing the state around and not referencing a global state atom. It's just, and I know reframe, the thing is you can decouple things a little easier that way. And you can as well, and you can do it with reframe as well, as long as you pass the state in to a function, blah, 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 blah. So, but true story, I haven't done a lot of ClojureScript programming in the last year or so. So, these things change. And I think, though, if I was going to reach for something today, it would be reagent, reframe, something that everybody uses. It's got a lot of backing. It's got a future, period. But before that, I would definitely still, roll simple until you need some more thinking around it, And I wouldn't making decisions about REST and GraphQL and blah, 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 blah. Like a lot of applications, you don't need that until until you're a certain size or you're pushing a certain amount of data, right? But a lot of applications are really small, a lot of,
So what you're thinking, just push a little bit of a message or just a JSON API or a sort of bit of transit data over the wire, that kind of thing.
Yeah, that's what I do initially with everything, because I don't need to solve all the problems, when I start picking the libraries for a project. I don't feel that way. I feel like things evolve, you learn so much about the problem you're solving as you're solving it. That an early commitment is it's not necessary, in my mind. But if you do know exactly what you're building and how big it's going to be, and you're going to need these characteristics, like if you work for Netflix, right? You're like, okay, day one, we know we have certain problems that will need to be solved immediately, right? But for a lot of other things, for a tremendous number of applications, they don't need a serious amount of complexity.
Yeah. And maybe one of the things about Clojure and ClojureScript is that you can scale that level of complexity out incrementally as well,
Yeah, you have options. You're dealing with functions, you have a lot of options to change how the game is played along the way. It's very, if you do things right, you're very low buy-in to any particular thing. Although getting rid of React would be hard.
So do you think ClojureScript is I think you keep saying React is the way to go to build applications, at least for you, or at least you think that has a bright future.
Yes.
Do you think that is without React, where do you see ClojureScript?
Oh, without React?
Yeah.
I think if React did, first of all, aside from first of all, the beginning of your question is, do I think ClojureScript is a good platform, and do I think see it going into the future? I honestly do. I think it's trade-offs for the people who use it. They're not like, worst experience ever. I mean, like a lot of people, they come on board and they're quite enthusiastic, and thank goodness. I mean, this may not be the case if if the complexity of the tooling in the JavaScript world has not hit like the knee in the exponential curve. It was doing fine, and then it just it went went crazy. It went to the point where you come back to it and you have no idea what's going on, and you're like, wow, and keeping up with it is quite difficult. So Clojure offers a tremendous story against that in the workflow and blah 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 blah. So even outside of React, I think if React did not exist, that the ClojureScript community would write React.
Yeah, because we nearly had that, didn't we, recently with the Facebook legal bullshit.
Oh yeah. I don't know actually what you're talking about.
Okay.
I mean, I
what
remember
it was that they were saying that everyone that used their software essentially was giving them a free pass to sue the shit out of them. So that was a really weird situation. So if you wrote an application with React, then you couldn't sue Facebook, and Facebook could sue you, basically. So it was like a weird legal arrangement where I think, for most of people it didn't really matter, but I think for people like Netflix or certain bigger companies, Amazon, Google, it was a problem,
Yeah, that is a problem. That's definitely a problem. That we have the control over it is not in our hands. Okay, so
I mean, luckily it all went away, so we were relieved. But it was just a sort of
Yeah, that's unfortunate. I'm not well informed on that issue at all. But it's unfortunate to hear that somebody could take my React away. So, but I promise you, this community, there are people chomping at the bit to rewrite React. So, it sucks for deployed programs, but ClojureScript is a great language to write a replacement for that. So I could see it happening very quickly.
Yeah, I think, like you say, the nice thing about it is that Facebook have it. They've got a dozen engineers making the experience smoother, promoting it, building all the ecosystem and infrastructure around it, and that counts for a lot, doesn't it? It's not just not just a function of the view, is it? Which is obviously that's the kind of the abstraction that they're offering, but there's a lot more than that. Yeah,
you're right. You're absolutely right. There is a lot more to it, and that's why we use it. That's yet another reason why we use it. But yeah, you're right. Absolutely. In React Native, yeah.
Let's get into spec a bit. So you wrote this library, Strictly Specking. Yeah. So what is the background on that one, and what is the relationship with spec, and where do you see that thing?
So Strictly Specking was and is primarily, right, so that I could give like feedback for the insane number of configuration parameters that are presented to somebody when they use Figwheel in conjunction with Clojure and ClojureScript, right? Like there's just a lot of configuration, and the possibility of doing it wrong is very high right? Like the possibility that, your assumptions about how the config should work and how it actually works can be widely divergent. So I wrote strictly specking, and this thing took me 3 months. I started once. It started before spec came out, right? So I'm working on this thing, and I wrote it once in core logic because I don't like myself, and then, right? And then I saw how quickly that ran. I'm going to use not. It did not run quickly. It ran so badly. But it was an interesting exercise. But it took a long time. And then I wrote it in, then I started writing my own version of spec, right? This is before spec came out. So I started writing my own. And then spec came out, and I was like, well, darn. That's not what I said. I said something else. But I was like, so and then I rewrote it again in spec. And spec was missing some things. Spec was missing some things. So strictly specking is written in spec. Spec is used as the back end for this.
Oh.
And And spec was not as programmable as I needed it to be. And so, because remember, all I wanted was a pointer. Like I wanted to know where in the data structure, I need a path to the point in the data structure where the problem is. And unfortunately, that wasn't easily done in spec. There have been some changes to it. Like I literally had to parse the spec forms from top to bottom in order to get this pathway. And and as spec changed, these things changed, and so that's half of strictly specking. The other half is like just doing kind of a probability inference of like, what did you mean when you said this, right? Like, and based on where you typed this, what did you mean? And so, and that's the other part of it. And so, and then printing it out in a way that, in my words are failing me, then printing it out with a code pointer in, your typed code. So it was very, very hard to actually write that. It wasn't easy, and the library is kind of messy or a mess. And I'm hoping to, I don't know. I hope I get a better idea sometime or a better way of structuring it, because I'd like to see it in line. Yeah. I'd like to see it in other things that are validating a lot of complex config. But right now, I wouldn't advocate its use outside of Figwheel, really. I mean,
yeah, we have been discussing this spec things in a couple of episodes these days, and one of the biggest problems is that the error messages that we put out for people when you're using spec. So, what is your opinion on that one? I mean, we've been very vocal about it's been shitty. So.
Okay, so you actually broke up a couple times there, so I didn't hear you precisely. But I think you're asking about the specs error messages. Is that correct? Okay, right, great. And there are different contexts here, right? Obviously, like I think, like if you're talking about specs error messages for the core macros. Like Clojure core macros and Clojure core special forms. Is that what you're talking about, or?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, if you're talking about those, it's two things, right? You've got like on the plus side, you have very precise information about what went wrong, but on the downside, like. Programming is this experiential, interactive activity, and your desire to go from the message to the problem is very high. You want this to be a quick transition. You don't want to parse spec messages at that particular moment, especially not for core macros like defen. Like you forgot the vector in defen, and now you have this message, which is huge. Now, moving backwards, so it feels like a devolution, right? Okay, but it's not, right? It is a stepping stone, because like before, the messages were ad hoc. They were still they seemed more helpful than the messages we get now for in certain situations. But so it feels like a devolution. But now you have you have a precise data, and so on top of that, you could provide it would be some work, but you could provide extremely granular. You can for the core macros now. You can write a library that says, okay, when I get this data, say this. When I get this data, say that. And so you could say precisely what's wrong in all the different situations that somebody types in the defen macro wrong, right? There's an increased amount of data, but it's very, and so this can evolve into something better. And I really personally think for the core macros and the core special forms, which essentially are syntax for laymen, like for laymen, they're syntax. For the core developers in the Clojure, they're running code. That's a macro is just another piece of code that's running, and I need, getting a stack trace into the macro for me is not a big idea. But for newer people, it looks like syntax. It feels like syntax, and it's a syntactic error, right? Now, it's important to have stack traces into macros when we're writing macros. Like we want to see, oh, it failed in the middle of the macro that I'm writing, and you want this big stack trace and blah, 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 blah. But again, for the core forms, and we need better error messages. And right now, we have a capacity to provide incredible error messages now that we have this extra data. How's that for like walking the line? You think I did a good job?
You avoided every possible mine there.
I wasn't, it's too easy, right? It's too easy to be like, screw those error messages. Error messages, what? Am I right? Come on, what's up with those?
Exactly.
Yeah, but it's also, I think, the other problem for me, Bruce. I think you're engineering wise, you're absolutely spot on. But I think from a kind of experience perspective, it's way off.
Oh, yeah.
So I don't think it's actually. I think engineering wise, it's been a definite step forward. But I think experience wise, I think they've shot themselves in the foot a little bit, and that's a shame.
Yeah, I agree. I think that. Yeah, I agree. The experience, you're left, when you're left with a question mark, a big question mark when a common error occurs, yes, in terms of experience, it's hard to argue that. And I have more to say about error messages if you want. Like this is something I thought about a lot. Like
I think maybe the reason is that that the reason why we are not working on error message as a community is that we don't make that many errors, so who cares? So like fuck this thing, people need error messages when constantly they keep making errors. We don't need them.
We don't. And I don't think that's fair.
You program with Emacs, you write Clojure, you don't make errors.
You don't make errors. Oh my god.
Exactly.
I make errors so often. It's ridiculous. Why do you think my error messages look good, right? Like
exactly.
No.
Makes sense.
Yeah. So when it comes down to it, like in this conversation about error messages, I think it'd be helpful to be a lot more precise about like what specifically people really want. To say better error messages could be misinterpreted very easily. Like better error messages. Like when you look at it and you know what you did wrong kind of an error message, that like, again, that's not very precise. Like specifically what we want is a concise message along with a pointer to the start and the end of the relevant code, right? Like as tool writers, that's what people want, right? Like, and as consumers, and now unfortunately that pointer from the beginning to the end, right, is contextual, right? What file are you in? Are you working on? And blah, 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 blah. But unfortunately, the capacity needs to be there to provide that information. And in many ways, ClojureScript has an edge on this because it uses Tools Reader. Clojure is behind on this, and there are a lot of situations where it's very hard. And spec doesn't help, right? Like spec doesn't give you, it's hard to get to like where in the code are we talking about here. So it doesn't help yet. So like this is our specific, I think this is people's specific ask, is a concise error message with a pointer from the beginning to the end, right? Like of the relevant code, if possible, right? And I think that this is entirely possible. I think it's not. I think we want error messages and this impression that the core team doesn't want to provide them. I think this is a bit of a I think there are priorities, and when you're the writer of the language, you get to have them, or blah 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 blah. And people can write libraries, standalone libraries that go a long way to do this. And you can wrap compile or eval around these libraries. It's not, you can do it to an extent, and you can go get a pretty good ways towards providing this functionality. But there are definitely, I think I really like somebody closer to the core team to actually try and write a library like this. It just because I think going through the exercise of trying to create good error messages for Clojure will provide informative feedback and back pressure on the language. Instead of saying it's, like giving people the impression that it's not a priority or it doesn't matter, which it's like, if that's true that people actually think this is stupid and people who ask about it's stupid, that's a problem. I don't know that that's true.
I think the issue is, everything you said is right. The problem is that the reason they put spec in the core was because they wanted to have broad adoption. And you can't have it both ways. You can't say, okay, we want to have broad adoption for spec so we're putting it in the core, but we're not going to give error messages because that's not, we don't need broad adoption of good error messages. So I think, your answer is good because like you've got Clojure 1.9, it's depending on an alpha version of spec, and that's fine. Why don't we have another library that goes with spec that's called error messages spec? That's another alpha library that doesn't have to be finished now. It's some work that got to be done, and it's just a matter of the core team putting a flag in the ground saying this is a priority for us, and not just saying sort it out community. I honestly think that Rich and Stu need to say that, and I'm sorry if that offends them or it upsets them, but tough shit. They really need to make this a priority for the language. They don't have to do it on day one. I get that. There are priorities, there are timescales, but they need to make it clear that all this engineering effort they're doing with spec, which is going to give us better messages in the end, we've all been promised this, that they're also caring about it and they're going to make it part of the core experience, not just this add-on experience that we have to somehow find on Google.
Yeah. And
rant over. Sorry.
No, and I really agree. I really agree that it is a problem. I agree it's a problem of the experience. I agree completely. And it would have been nicer if this was addressed longer ago. It really would have been nice. But again, with the caveat, again, why am I defending Cognitect and Rich?
I don't know.
I have no idea. Maybe just because
We're not sponsored by them, Bruce.
Yeah.
You don't need...
No. The thing is I empathize.
of course,
I empathize with them.
Because, it's a tough problem.
Well, yeah, and like,
no one's disagreeing with that.
But it's a solvable problem, and that's probably why you're like, it's not impossible, people. This is this is a solvable problem. So again, if they had, I don't know. I want better error messages too, and I want it. I want it for newcomers, and it shouldn't like messing up while you write a def and mag, while you're defining a function and getting an error message that is completely nonsensical, is obviously not good for the Clojure. It's not good for Clojure. Now, it doesn't bother me. I mean,
exactly.
it doesn't bother me. I can, that doesn't even matter. I'll figure it out. It doesn't, like, I don't need error messages the way I used to need them. As the compiler moves into my head, this becomes less of an issue. But I want them. I want more people to use Clojure, and that's why I'm writing the REPL read line.
Yeah. Right, before we go on to the REPL read line, because I think that's going to getting everyone excited. I'll ask one random question from the stream, okay, and then I want to talk about dev cards,
okay,
because see what the state of that is. Well, I don't know where there's do you know Zach Oaks? He's another Clojure script.
Yeah.
Of course, you know Zach, awesome guy.
I know Zach. I mean, I don't know him personally, Zach. Zach, I don't know you personally.
Well, you're lucky then.
But I've heard of Zach for sure.
Yeah. So he asks a question in the stream there, says, is there a connection between exploratory interactive programming and comedy improv? So you do some of that? I don't know.
It's a creative process. Is that a good answer? Like, it's a creative process? But no, like it is. It's being in the flow and responding to the moment is being in the flow and being able to respond to the moment, it's not one, it's a singular experience, whether you're building a deck, or writing a program or doing improv on stage or greeting somebody you've never met before, right? Like you being open to what's actually happening and then you're responding to it. So I am super experiential when it comes to programming. I mean, I just try lots of stuff. This idea of like being some brainchild and boom, whoosh, it doesn't work like that. I try stuff, a lot of stuff.
Yeah. Okay, that was a bit of a random question, that one.
No, it's fine.
It's fine. Yeah. Okay. So dev cards, before we go on to the latest and greatest stuff. So what can you give us people a little bit of a background to dev cards?
Dev cards is just an extension. Like I would say all of my projects focus on the idea of bringing this dynamic, fluid, responsive nature of Clojure to life. Putting it in people's hands in a way where they can use it immediately. And dev cards is specifically that. And the way I've explained this before many, many times. I didn't even have to say that. Why did I say it? We'll edit that out, okay? I'm tired of explaining it. No.
I'm sick of explaining this, God damn it.
No. It's that you can't have a REPL there's no such thing as a REPL with a GUI, right? It's just like, it's very hard to get interactive feedback when you're like creating GUI components from scratch. Right? Like it's just very, because when you're writing we develop in the context, we're always developing in the context of a larger program where we're developing for the browser. It's always a larger context. And so that context often prevents you from trying things out, like stupid things. Like, in the middle of my application, now I'm going to plop in this dumb little experiment to see if I can make this button turn into a smiley face, right? You're like, there's no place in my code to put this and try it out. And if I have to create a whole new project to try it out, I'm going to shoot myself, right? Because it's not fun creating a whole new project. And so Dev Cards is born out of this, the idea that it should be easy to create independent code examples and have them be interactive and show up as soon as you type them. So that was the idea there.
Yeah, it's really nice. Yeah. So VJ, that's awesome. Yep. I mean,
have you ever?
To be honest, I've played them a couple of times, but I've not really went into it in a great deal of depth. So
and I think
I feel a bit bad,
You shouldn't feel bad. I think that's the common experience. That like it's like kind of you either really dig it or you don't. And I haven't used them a lot lately myself. So there you go.
I'm in good company.
But I think given a situation where they make sense, I would use them, right? Like I would, but to think that I'm, there's obviously places for them, and there's obviously, for a certain type of programming where you're explaining what you're doing and seeing it visually, it could probably help you drill down on a problem a lot better. But yes, again, like, it's another tool you have to add in, and you have to learn it and use it, and there's weight there.
But how do you see with Figwheel, and Figwheel being one of the best experiences for the developers? I mean, what do you think is the future vision for this kind of developer tooling? How do you see the programming is going to be? With of course, we keep saying exploratory programming, interactive programming.
Yeah.
But what do you see for the future for the developer tools?
We're entering into a really interesting future. Like you saw Dynamic Land, like Brett Victor's Dynamic Land. Have you seen that?
Yeah.
The pieces of paper with the programs on them. And you add that, then we're like, if you're talking in visionary, I'm just going to answer in kind of a visionary kind of response to that question. And you add to that like real augmented reality, like with Magic Leap and stuff like that. There's just a lot of, you can get a lot of feedback with augmented reality. You can get, a lot of, you can put a lot of functionality into inanimate objects. And so, will that mean anything in terms of building a web page? In terms of Clojure script tooling and blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
Let me ask it back. Do you see something coming down the line? I mean, are you like, is there something that I need to know?
No. Obviously, I'm not that experienced, or I have no fucking clue. I just follow people like you who are much more experienced in creating tools that people like me use. So I was wondering if you're thinking about Figwheel, for example. That came out the idea of exploratory programming and making the feedback loop as tighter as possible. So how do you see this kind of thing moving forward?
Well, in terms of Figwheel, I've had several interesting ideas. One is obviously spec, like providing decent feedback, and spec is different, right? Because these are runtime errors, right? So this is different than the compile time errors that you see pop up in Figwheel. Like delving into the runtime errors is something Figwheel hasn't really done, and DevTools, rocks, right? So where do you fit in here? Well, spec. There might be an opportunity to create something, and it doesn't even need to be part of Figwheel, right? Because you can. This could be a library that's completely separate that provides feedback for spec errors. Another thing, like for Clojure script, is like in terms of tooling, keeping statistics about errors is, I think, super interesting. Keeping statistics about these meta things and having them viewable as data, I think, is really interesting. I think it's also interesting for tool creators. I think it's interesting for language creators. So, yeah. Keeping a visual history of keeping like a visual history of the messages that are like, oh, an error. I got an error, a warning, an error, a boom, ba boom, ba boom. I got an error got this error a little while ago, and being able to open up a tab and being like, oh, this is what's transpired so far in my development experience. I'm, there might be something might pop out at you. It's just more information. I tooled with the idea of having, when you launch Figwheel, you have this window that's an application, and you can click whichever build you want to go to, and then work on that build. Like, so Figwheel / build idea gives you this meta view of the build and the messages you've gotten so far, and maybe a UI to let you turn on and off Figwheel features, right? So add a little more UI to Figwheel that way. Yeah. So that's something that's occurred to me, but nothing that's like blown me away. Like, I haven't had anything that's like, this is gonna like rock people's world type of a thing. So yeah.
Well,
Just
I think pretty much
incremental
Figwheel did,
improvements.
right? I mean, at least most of the people's worlds. So.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Great.
So you've been working on the read line all the live long day.
I know that was I questioned myself before.
That's a good one. I mean, yeah, okay.
But
Maybe there is certain
smug. It's like, what is it? What is this thing that he's doing? But yeah, I've been working on a read line for about 3 weeks. And yeah, there's a story here. And the story was, I did Advent of Code, and I really every year I do the Advent of Code programming challenge, and I don't compete because I'm not going to get up at midnight. I'm not going to start working on a programming problem at midnight every night for a month. Yeah. That seems like a bad lifestyle choice for somebody.
So you're just telling us it's in the wrong time zone, basically. Yeah.
Yeah. Like, if you live in California, then you're doing it at 9 o'clock at night, which seems fine. But at midnight, nah, that's not that kind of, that's too. But the working on the programming problems themselves is excellent way to reflect on programming experience, blah 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 blah, and just have fun working on concise problems that have no, there's literally no downside to doing it wrong. So it reminds you to enjoy yourself while you're programming again. I really like it. And then I was so addicted to doing problems, I picked up TIS 100. I don't know if you're familiar with the assembly programming game by Zachtronics, TIS 100. It's super fun. It's assembly programming. And there's all these parallel processors that you're only allowed to put 12 instructions in each in a grid. And you can talk to the processors next to each other. And you've got like 12 or 15 instructions in each of these blocks. And you have a set of problems you need to solve. And it is quite fun. Yeah, for some strange reason, describing it sounds like the opposite of fun. Yeah. But it is a surprising amount of fun. Like, you start it and you think, I'm going to hate this. And then you're like 5 problems in and you're like, oh, if I put this over here, then I can do that. And then, it's great fun. I advise everybody to try it. It's like the easiest way to remember assembly programming again. And yeah. Okay. So that led me to thinking about writing a game of my own that with this theme of these programming games are fascinating to me. Like, why is it fun to program? I love programming. I have fun. I mean, I literally have fun programming. I write a lot of open source without a lot of remuneration. And I keep, I do it. I keep doing it. What is my problem? So I thought, well, the REPL is kind of a game. Like, what, so I had this idea, like, what if somebody boots up a REPL and it says connecting to a remote server, da 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 da, and then gives you some kind of heading, like this one said Lisp System 14 in like the block ASCII letters, and then it had a login. It has like a login. It asks for like a password, and so you don't know what to do, right? So you type in a password, and then it says wrong password, and then it does a core dump, and it dumps you into the REPL. And then you have to figure out what the heck is going on, right? And so you start, right? So you start doing dir and source. You start using these REPL commands to inspect the environment, and you find out that, oh, there's a bug in the password thing, right? And you fix the bug in the password thing, and then you move into the next stage. It loads like a new namespace. You have a new problem to solve, and you keep doing this. So this is like, and it's funny because, I mean, this is way too much detail, but the idea is like the next module is encrypted to the answer of the previous module, right? So you could pull it down offline or blah, 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 as soon as you figure out the answer to the previous one. And so the idea with, this is great, and you need a really good story to drive this. I don't have a good story yet. So I started working on this thing, and it was a tremendous amount of work, and I just noticed that the REPL experience is not game-worthy, right? It's like so not game-worthy.
Yeah.
You know, it's not, like, it just doesn't, it's not good, right? And it doesn't need to be good for experienced programmers. For experienced Clojure programmers, you do not need to have a good REPL experience because you've hooked it into your editor and, you know, Bob's your uncle. But for people who are new, people who are experienced, so anyway, I decided to write this read line.
Yeah.
And I'm doing a quick segue because I was starting to go off on a tangent. So I started to write this read line, and it made me, you know, it really made me reflect more on the idea that we experience Clojure so differently than people who are coming to the language in the beginning. We experience it so differently, right?
Yeah.
This is a different thing about Clojure.
Yes.
Right? A lot of other languages, the compile, write, run feedback loop is the default. So people can come to Clojure and do a write, read feedback. They can do a write, run feedback loop. They can, you know, use Clojure main or rerun a script with Clojure main over and over again, and pretty much assume, oh, they got it. It's a programming language that has these features, blah, blah, blah. They're missing what I would say at least 50% of the story, if not 70% of the story, which is the experience of writing Clojure.
Yeah.
And the fluidity of the feedback. So let's put it into the read line. Let's put our experience as experienced Clojure developers. If we put it into the first thing that these people experience, it gives them time to acclimatize to this idea of inline eval, which kind of sounds stupid to put in a REPL, inline eval, but then once you start doing it, it starts making sense. So if we put this experience of inline eval, which is extremely foreign to other people, to other programmers coming from other programming languages, you can show it to them, you can describe it to them, and they still don't get what inline eval is.
Yeah.
Like, you have to experience it and make it part of your problem solving, and then you're like, parentheses makes sense. You know, you start to really, really get it. So yeah, that's the idea behind this readline library, is to make the fluidity of our programming experience available to newcomers, and so they can annihilate foreclosure problems, right? They've got this really nice editing interface in their REPL, and they're doing foreclosure. They've got a great way to work, and they have they can learn more about what it's like to work with a Clojure programming, a Lisp programming language. And I had another point. Oh, the other thing is, right, it's impossible to choose tooling if you're new to Clojure.
Yeah.
It is basically impossible. Everybody says Emacs, cursive, Sublime. Yeah, I use VS Code. And then what? Oh, they don't have experience. Like a lot of programmers from other programming languages do not have an experience of an integrated REPL, right? So they don't know how to choose tools that optimize this. Well, if we provide that in our REPL immediately, they will get this immediate experience of, oh, these are the features I want from my editor. Right? I want to have access to online documentation. I want to have, access to source code. I want to have, inline eval. I want to have apropos. Is that how you pronounce that? How do you apropos?
Probably.
I have no idea.
Who cares?
I've never heard
but
of it.
we know what you mean.
Apropos. Apropos.
Apropos.
Yeah.
Apropos. I don't know. Yeah, anyway. So, yeah, that's the idea. Have I preached long enough about that?
Yeah. So,
like, who's going to disagree with me at this point?
No, nobody.
No, I think honestly, the funny thing is that this is one of the things that I say a lot as well, is because actually, I came from a Java background and a C and all these kind of like you say compile environments. Didn't have the experience at the beginning of this REPL. And, it probably took me really, I'd say even a year to fully grok that the REPL was the thing, And I really get it now. I do everything in the REPL now. Putting things into files is kind of annoying, It's just something I've got to do to ship code,
Doing the dishes, washing, everything in REPL.
What was that, VJ?
No, he says he's doing everything in REPL now. So, doing washing and dishes and stuff. And practically everything is in REPL now. So,
well, actually, the funny thing is, that's kind of true, because it comes back to what you were saying earlier about being experiential. It's because when you're doing your real life things, you're getting feedback all the time. And actually, so I'm bringing the washing machine, if you like, to the to the programming environment, because everything is just live. And I find it really nice when people like you and Zach and other people are like really working, like Mike Fikes and all these guys are working on the REPLs and making them better. This proto REPL stuff, all the REPL stuff is really exciting, because I think that's the superpower of Clojure. I really do. I think that's, if we're looking for like what's the game changer, it's not machine learning. It's not all this other bullshit, because every language can do that, but they haven't got a REPL, and if they have got one, it's shit. So this is like, why aren't we selling this as hard and as hard as deep as possible? So I love it. I think you're doing a great job there.
Oh, thank you. It was a surprise that I didn't know that I certainly didn't know I was going to work on this, but I got lucky. I got lucky here too. J-Line 3, this tireless programmer has been working on this. And it's pretty darn capable, and it handles like all the hard stuff of doing, terminal read line, which is, there's a whole layer there that you don't ever want to have to get into. Yeah. So
Great. Okay. So I mean, that's one of the things to me is like, as far as the REPL is concerned, like where do you think that whole live experience is going to go? I mean, you're doing this read line stuff. What are your plans for it beyond the already awesome stuff you've got here? Where are you going with it?
I mean, so that's a good question. There are a couple things that occur to me, right? Like, first of all, there's a lot of features you could put a lot of features into. It's practically an editor, right? It looks a lot like Emacs once you start programming it. You're like, oh, this looks very, very familiar with this. I'm got a buffer. I'm changing things in the buffer. I'm setting it back into, it's very, I'm syntax highlighting. I mean, all of this is very familiar. But there's, I think, in terms of making it the experience better, I think that what I have is already pretty nice. Pretty nice compared to like all the REPLs I've seen. I've looked at IPython, and I've looked at I tried to get a look at what people were doing. I looked at reasons. I looked at, and this is pretty nice. And most of it's because Clojure does this already. I'm just kind of lifting it up so people can see it more quickly. So it'd be further features for this particular thing would be inline read errors, read exceptions. Like, oh, this is a bad token, underline it. All right, that would be very, very nice. Again, kind of common experience. But yeah, bringing more things like that. I would love to have like, this is just a readline library, so it doesn't really have anything to do with the output. But I would love to pair this with libraries that do handle output, that handle error messages and stuff like that. I think that altogether you could create an amazing REPL experience with colored output and blah, 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 blah. And reformatting the last line with a pointer to where the error is would be fantastic. Aside from that, this terminal library is very interesting, and I think you could easily write a library that would let people experiment with writing terminal games. You know, like you could easily write a library with a nice programming, because basically you're taking in data, you're returning a string, right? So you could write a nice functional library that composes widgets, that composes objects the way you would in a game library, that has an update. Maybe it calls update, and then you draw a new screen, kind of a thing. You could do this very, very quickly, and give access to kids and other programmers, like another domain in which to explore programming, which is very safe. Like, it's just the REPL. I don't have to learn all of HTML, HTTP, but I don't have to learn this whole model. Now I just have this program running on this computer, and I can write a graphical-ish program using characters, which is very, very, very comprehensible for people. So give another domain for people to explore and have fun with. Yeah.
Okay, excellent. Yeah, because I was thinking also the other thing that these REPLs could do is, contribute towards this like literary programming, or that kind of what should we say, the notebook thing that's becoming popular with machine learning people or big data people. This concept of integrating these REPLs into a broader kind of environment.
Yeah. I think of course I find that super interesting. Very, very interesting. And I haven't, I've been so down in the technicals. I haven't like stepped back for a more visionary look at it. But you're right. Like, this particular library, right? It's just for
yeah.
So it's in terms of like, it's not a new REPL. It's only read lines. So again, like in terms of vision around REPLs, like, I don't know if you've ever used IPython Notebook or Gorilla REPL or anything, but I've
used the Gorilla and the Proto REPL and stuff like that.
Yeah. I still feel really confined in that. Like for some reason, not being in a file. I find really constricting in terms of expression. Not being in a file in an editor that is like Emacs or something like that, I find difficult to edit in. Now these things are getting much, much better, like in the browser and blah, blah, blah. So that experience could change, and it could just be. But
what do you mean not being in a file, Bruce? I'm kind of confused by that. What do you mean by not being in a file?
Well, IPython Notebook, you're actually in this interface when you're editing code, right? Yep. You're in the browser, and when you're editing code, right? And now, unless I've got this wrong, when you use IPython Notebook, you're in a browser, you're in a web app, and you're typing in code. So coding in that environment, I find personally constricting.
Yeah. Sorry, I mistook you. I thought it was the other way around. because I was getting. I think that would be very constraining as well. Yeah.
Yeah. I find it very, very constraining, and that's what's different about dev cards. Like, if you ever get a chance to use it, I find dev cards to be an interesting direction for proto-REPL and these let's just say graphical REPLs for better, the graphical literate REPLs. I find dev cards is kind of my answer to like an interesting take on that, because you can use dev cards as a graphical interactive REPL, but the thing is you're typing in a file and you're getting the graphical feedback in the browser immediately. Yeah. So you get to actually operate in a file and do whatever you want. And then the feedback and the graphs and the whatever you want is coming in the browser. And that, I think that's a much more interesting, let me put it another way. I think you have opportunity for more expression and more exploration that way.
The other question I've got for you, and it's something that I'm not saying all of this thing is your responsibility, by the way. I'm not saying you owe something here. And we're just talking about ideas, So it's one of the things that I was doing something with a friend of mine recently, where we were trying to experiment with like shared, and there's been some projects with it to have like 2 or 3 or 4 people on the same file, editing things together and collaborating. And there was a guy who was on this show actually. Case did this CREPL, which is this collaborative REPL. But he's kind of run out of steam and money and time, so a bit of a shame. But there we are. But this whole notion of like having a REPL that you can log into and then you can share it, I was getting excited by this this Atom thing. They have this thing called Teletype, where you can essentially log in to the same, but it's logging into the same text file. It's like a Google Doc or something. Atom does have a REPL, so in theory. But you can't see it, you can't share it. So it's fucking annoying, basically. Excuse me, but so well, I don't want to edit the file. The file is bullshit. I want to put my code in the REPL and evaluate things. And that doesn't exist. And that's sort of annoying to me, So can you do that? No, but what do you think about the idea? I mean, I'm not saying, like I say, you're not on the hook for it. But is that something that's interesting to you?
Yeah, I find that really interesting, and it's a tough one. Like if I was going to explore this problem, it's a tough one, because like you're buying into something, and it's tough to create something that transcends it all. Like I recently used like a tmux sharing app that lets you share, your terminal screen.
Yeah.
Even if you're behind 4 levels of NAT and whatever, like you could still do it, and that was interesting. There was an NREPL middleware that
you can do it.
This.
No, actually, I've tried this, and that does work. Yeah, it does
that
work.
Works?
Yeah. You can have multiple people typing into the REPL via tmux. Yeah. That works.
Okay. Yeah, but I think there's also NREPL middleware that was created to do this. I have never used it. And because when you think about it, you're just multiplexing messages at that point with NREPL middleware. But I'm not so sure. Like, there would need to be.
The problem with tmux is that you're just typing a REPL, so anybody can do anything. There's no differentiation. There's no, you can't see.
Okay, I see what you're saying.
Ray's doing this, and John is doing that, and Jill's doing this.
I see what you're saying. Gotcha.
Whereas that's a nice thing about like the Google Docs or the CREPL was, because it's using the CRDT model, then you could see what the source of the input was, and you could see what the timeline was.
Yep.
And how it was evolved.
Yep.
Yeah. Anyway, it was really nice,
Yeah. And it sounds really nice. It sounds really nice. I'm just a loner though, man. I'm just a loner. You know,
Like obviously, you don't need multiple people typing into REPL because one programmer is enough for Clojure. So it's like we don't need error messages. We don't need multiple people in the team. It's just bullshit. I mean, just sit one programmer opening CLJ with the JLine tool that Bruce has built, and then Figwheel, and you're done. That's it. Like, why the fuck do you need like 17 people typing into REPL anyway? It doesn't make any sense.
You don't need it. You don't need anything, VJ.
I told you, obviously,
I'm a dreamer.
But anyway.
I should do it myself. I should shut up and just do it myself. All right, listen. So when's
Exactly.
this read line coming out then, Bruce? What's the plan for that? Because
Yes.
you're teasing us all with this video. So when are you going to put it out there?
yeah.
Scoop for Defen,
I don't know. Yeah.
Please give it to us.
Yes. I am in the process of moving it from a exploration into something that people can use, and you know how I don't know, like how that is. It's there's a point where there's the edge of your feature. You cut down. You try to cut your feature list, and you're like boom. But unfortunately, like like rounding all those off, the surface area, is always a little bigger than you expect. As you're like cleaning it up and rounding it out, you're like, this surface area is a bit bigger than I expected. So I would like to have something people can give me feedback on.
Mm-hmm.
Not something that's going to work, but something that people can give me feedback on in a couple weeks.
Okay.
I'd really like to do that, because it might not work. Like it works in iTerm, it works great. Like once it gets out in the world, if it just falls flat on its face, it'd be nice to know earlier.
Well, if you're looking for some beta testers, let me know.
Okay, all right.
Okay, so I think we are
Oh my
almost
gosh.
1 hour 40 minutes now.
Oh man, yeah, okay, yeah.
Wow,
Yeah.
that's
I think there are still people who are still watching us. That's pretty nice.
yeah.
So I think we covered most of the questions that we got, except for only one question that's like, what do you think about JavaScript itself compared to other things?
Clojure script. I worked in JavaScript for a long time, and this is a much earlier time, a different age, and I enjoyed the experience because it was dynamic and you got feedback pretty quickly, comparatively quickly. Really, like this is before you compiled your JavaScript. You just reload the browser and you see the new behavior, and it was guaranteed that you would see new behavior. Like there was no complexity between that. So
good old days.
Java, I think, but it's just too easy to say. JavaScript has problems and blah 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 blah. I was really fascinated to hear that Python outstripped JavaScript in terms of popularity. I don't know what numbers backed that up. It didn't make any sense to me, but that was a weird.
Yeah.
But yeah, the JavaScript language it's fine. If I had to use it, I would use it and not complain that much.
Yeah.
I would complain about the tooling all day, but the language, it's.
But I think
if I had a choice of if I would choose CoffeeScript, I would want to blunt the edge a little bit.
Yeah.
But the new JavaScript the syntax is nice. They've got nice features, but there's still lots of little things waiting there for you. So yeah.
Okay. Cool. Okay. So I think we covered most of the questions that people asked, and if the people who have joined on the live stream, if you have any questions, then this is you have like 3 seconds to type the questions. Otherwise, we're gonna close the show for now. And thanks a lot for joining. And Bruce, again, Figwheel is one of the greatest tools available right now, and we are so thankful for making this tool and then releasing it for free. I don't know how you're getting paid by all this stuff, but But giving it away for free is
Oh,
amazing.
wait, you know what? I have to announce something else.
Yes, please.
Well, actually, I do get paid every day.
Yeah.
And the Clojures, you guys heard of Clojures Together?
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Yeah, I got that.
Awesome.
To work on,
Awesome.
To work on Figwheel. Yeah. So it's
Perfect.
like $5,400.
Perfect.
And yeah, it is some
Yeah.
money. And I hope I got that number right.
It's not just $54.
You know,
Extra zeros.
That was
yeah.
actually cents. That was just
well, that's
cents.
great. $54. That pays for like 30 hours of my time. So that's great. No, kidding. Please don't take that seriously.
No.
So yeah, so I got that, and I'm super stoked about that. I think Daniel Compton's done a great job with
Yes,
that.
yes.
And yeah, so
That's fantastic. I mean, of course, I mean, this
So
is something
donate.
that we want to tell other people as well, as much as possible. Daniel was there on the show as well, talking about Clojures Together. Because this is one of the things that community needs, right? At the end of the day, I mean, people need to pay, people need to work on things, and you can't just keep shitting out code without getting food. Wow, that's a nice metaphor. Okay.
how did you know where my code
Exactly.
comes from? That was just a private.
Some people have hammock
thing,
time, other people have other times.
Other times too. No, but all the joking aside, I mean, things like Clojures Together, I mean, they help sustaining the community for longer amount of time, because people need to pay the bills and they need to work on these tools, and these tools are not, they're extremely high quality. Things like Figwheel, things like dev cards, and even the ASCII thing that you're building right now with RLWrap. This is just mind blowing stuff, and I can imagine the amount of time that you're putting to make these things shine like this. So we are very, very grateful for that. Yeah. And of course, just being grateful is not enough to pay the bills. So this is why people need to contribute to things like Clojures Together. So people who are listening to this thing, if you are using any of these tools, go to Clojures Together. Join as a member. Ask your company to join as a member if you're using Clojure. That'll be amazing. Anyway, so Bruce.
And I think that is true. And direct contributions work as well.
Yeah.
So, like on my way, just as well. So it really does. It helps. Direct contributions, and and you think like, oh, why would he need to ask for that? It helps me monetarily, and it helps me know that people actually care about the tools.
Yes.
Like instead of just through word of mouth. So there's not a lot. I don't get a lot in there, but when I do, it makes me feel good. It makes me feel like people appreciate it.
Yeah.
So it's another way. But do not take money away from Clojures Together to give to me. I would say that is, I want Clojures Together to succeed and be well supported. And every now and then think of me. That's all I'm saying.
Yep.
I hate to end on asking for money, because this is not where I wanted to go.
No. I mean, it's
not where I wanted to go.
I wouldn't see that like that. I mean, this is the people cannot shy away from this stuff, right? I mean, people can keep taking things for free. I mean, it's not a problem. Free is not free as in, it's about the freedom that people are getting. They can fix the code, they can look at the code, they can do whatever they want. It's not, I don't think, it's not asking for money. It's people showing appreciation, people showing their support. So that is something, that we appreciate a lot as well. And when we opened Patreon, we were like, oh my God, people are actually giving us dollars. So like, okay, this is too much. This is too much. I mean, this is just random shit that we are speaking out into the microphones, and people are putting their hard-earned money. So anyway, but yeah, Clojures Together is something that I think should become a bigger organization and helping much more libraries for long-term sustainability of the language. I agree with you completely on that one. Okay. So, Zach says, Bruce, you rock.
And Zach Oakes, he says, I rock. And he also said that we should make tote bags with the Figwheel logo on them. and sell them. So
merchandise, Bruce. That's what it's all about.
I'm gonna
Take a pass on that one.
I should have started merchandising a long time ago. I don't know what I was thinking, but because today you just put your junk on Amazon fulfillment and let it fly. So
That sounds rude, though.
yeah, I'm sorry. Oh my God, you're right. Yeah, I want to end on.
I'm begging for money and I'm putting my junk out on the internet.
Gosh, I wanted to end on a positive note, and we're all obviously too tired. Yeah. Good,
Come
good,
on,
good.
I mean, Bruce. I mean, did you hear any? Did you listen to any of the episodes from Defn before? You know this is bullshit. So you know how things end in Defn anyway. So you should have known before you come onto the show. You're like, this is gonna be a disaster. Yeah, that's true.
This is gonna be horrible. No, it's great. In fact, I really enjoyed every minute of it. It was. This is fun, guys. Thanks for asking me.
Thanks a lot for joining, and thanks a lot for all the work, and for the people who are watching, thanks a lot for bearing with us during our technical difficulties and everything. We hope you enjoyed the show, and I think we'll try to continue doing this live streaming thing a bit, and then see how it works.
It seems to have worked a lot better this week. I mean, we've got more people chatting. I think if people do type into live chat. That's the words. The words have to come out. Yeah. People type into live chat and get a bit of interaction going. Then it's really lovely, and it's been really good. Thank you guys for who's been on the live stream. I really appreciate it. And all the people on Twitter and these other people on Slack, all the questions that have come in for you, Bruce. It's easy when you're here because everyone's loving you. So, we like bask in the reflected glory of the Hauman. So that's good for us.
Exactly.
Oh my God. We're
trying to end on a good note, Bruce.
Well, let's do it again sometime for sure. Let's do it again sometime and.
Exactly.
Yeah, I'd love to talk to you guys again.
Perfect.
Next year or something. That'd be great.
Definitely. Well, you're always producing stuff. Never-ending font of new code, so it'll be great.
So goodbye, everyone, and then I think you can listen to this on podcast pretty soon. Thank you.
Can you stop the recorder? I don't know what I'm doing.